Welcome to the Do You Ever Wonder podcast. Ever find yourself wondering about the world's biggest topics? Join your host, Mike Haltman, CEO, board chair, and all-around deep thinker, as he dives into real estate, investing, national security, self-improvement, dating, networking, finance, and so much more. Expert guests, real conversations, no limits. Hit subscribe and get ready for insights, surprises, and conversations that will make you think. The Do You Ever Wonder podcast starts now.
You know, I actually said to somebody on a prior podcast, that intro makes me sound pretty good.
Absolutely.
The problem is you have to live up to it now. But listen, I would like to welcome Waldo Waldman. This is like Groundhog's Day because we did have a discussion prior, but due to technical difficulties, it didn't get taped. So, you know, Waldo, I know you have an unbelievably busy schedule, and from our discussion last time, you had mentioned that one of the reasons you agreed to come on this podcast was because of my involvement with the Heroes to Heroes Foundation. But thank you very much for joining me again.
And you're a fellow Long Islander, so
That's right. If
that
I
always
recall,
helps.
your father worked at JFK.
He did.
And we discussed how I wouldn't mind like just driving there and parking my car and watching planes take off and land. I mean, I think it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
But so Waldo is a longtime veteran, a fighter pilot, and how many missions did you fly, Waldo?
365 hours, actually.
Amazing. And what is, to me, one of the most incredible things is that you had suffered from a fear of heights and from claustrophobia, which, being in a cockpit of a fighter jet, must be two incredible things. So, you know, just as the first incredible thing, how did you overcome those to be able to become a pilot?
So everybody at the end of the day has obstacles and headwinds and challenges that prevent them from doing the things they want, you know. And I always say passion trumps fear, right? You got to be passionate about what you do, but then also training, responsibility, purpose, the fact that you're not doing it alone, that there's other teammates, men and women on your team, partners, what I call wingmen, who are there for you. And so when I struggled with my claustrophobia, I had to really go deep into that why before I fly, you know, the meaning. And I can do probably 6 hours just talking about this alone. But for those of you who are listening to this, who are pushing yourself for a dream, you know, you want to start a business, get married, become an entrepreneur, increase your sales, lose 10 or 20 pounds, enter a bodybuilding competition, or whatever. You need this compelling goal, this high stakes type of goal that's achievable only if you put your ass and heart and soul into it. And when I had my issues of claustrophobia and a fear of heights, you know, what stood beyond those fears was flying jets, was the thrill of and passion of serving my country and being in an F-16. The fact that I'd leave a legacy for my son, to look back and say, hey, my dad did something really, really cool. And it's hard to go into depth on that, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of variables that go into allowing you to overcome your fear. And we don't have time to go over it on this podcast.
I don't think we do. But so when you would enter the fighter jet, would you have those feelings of claustrophobia, of fear, of heights, of anxiety, or you were able to overcome those through whatever techniques you used before you got in and you went in with a clear mind, which you need?
Yeah, it's a great question. Most of the panic happened before strapping into the plane, like the what ifs, the sleepless nights, or walking to the jet, and et cetera. And you're like thinking, you know, what if I have that panic attack? You know, what if I get shot down or shot at or lose my life? I mean, all these things happen in combat. But for me, the next level was this claustrophobia. And for those that don't know, I almost died in a scuba diving accident 3 years into my 11-year flying career. and I developed PTSD from it and ultimately claustrophobia. So for like 8 of my 11 active duty flying careers, almost 3,000 hours of flight time, I had to have deal with this anxiety and phobia and doubt and claustrophobia that most people didn't know I had.
Well,
And so,
well,
you
no,
know,
it's interesting that claustrophobia is kind of almost like a learned trait. I was stuck in a small elevator with pregnant women wearing fur coats, and it stopped. And from that point on, I had severe claustrophobia. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And I don't know what made me overcome it, unless it was the pills I started taking. But uh, and I'm sure that's not your methodology.
no, it's not my methodology now, thank goodness. If it had to be, I think having a drug that stabilizes you and makes you present and less depressed and more focused is a blessing, right? We ideally want to be able to do it without it, but it's important. A lot of my loved ones have take medication to help them cope. But it is some kind of learned behavior. It's a psychosomatic behavior. There's all these variables that come, but part of it was preparing before the anxiety happened, going through the contingencies. I always say wingmen never wing it. And so before I strapped in, I would go through what if I'm going to have a panic attack? What if I'm at 30,000 feet? What are some of the techniques? I call it distracting myself from myself, focusing on my team, getting involved with the radar, focusing on a picture of my niece or nephew of somebody that I love, like anything that I could do to refocus my attention away from myself and this thing right here, the
Right.
noggin, which is the biggest detriment
No question.
and attribute to success, but also going through those. So confidence gets built when you prepare and have a contingency plan. And so if you're starting a business, doing a cold call, starting a podcast, right? Or whatever, you have this plan, you have the tools, you've rehearsed, you've got the training that builds the confidence that dodges missiles and helps you deal with these anxieties. And so a lot of people are afraid because they simply didn't put in the time. You're up at bat, bottom of the ninth, tie score, full count. How much did you practice in the batting cage in these positions? Did you putting yourself in those situations as well is important. Resilience is a huge factor here. Bending and flexing with these fears, and the way you build resilience isn't necessarily through coping mechanisms like a pet or a drug or smelling a flower, listening to music or meditating. Those are amazing things to help you reduce your fear, become more present, and deal with anxiety. I think the biggest thing to do is to get used to the fears and anxieties and panics and exposing yourself to those uncomfortable situations so you build this level of awareness and comfort with it, like being comfortable being uncomfortable,
So you know that you can overcome it.
and you've been there before. Like athletes, when you're running and working out, like if you start a new exercise routine and you're really, really tired, like, holy crap, man, I'm not enjoying this. This sucks. I want to quit. I don't want to do this plank. I don't want to do these burpees or whatever. I'm about to pass out. But you'll find the more you expose yourself to those uncomfortable moments,
The better you get.
the better you get and the more aware that you are of them. And you're like, I've been here before. I've been in this situation. I'm going to work my way through it. And your body and your mind are incredible tools. You just got to be willing to put yourself in those uncomfortable situations. So that's what I did a lot of times. You know, uh, Flying fighters and exposing myself to my panic attacks. The more I did it, the more I overcame it, the more confidence that I got, and the less foreign it was for me, and less of an impediment to breaking through that fear barrier and still accomplishing the mission.
It's hard to fathom the being up at 30,000 feet, potentially in a life or death situation, and having to have your mind grapple with anxiety. I mean, I can't even imagine. But you had mentioned before a very important phrase that I've tried, particularly my oldest daughter, to try and get her to take it out of her vocabulary, and that is "what if." when you use what if, you never extrapolate it to a good outcome for the most part. I mean, maybe you learned how to do that, but most people when they're dealing with an issue, when they're dealing with a crisis, and they say, what if? It always ends up in the most disastrous outcome that it could, and that just proliferates the whole anxiety, fear, the whole. It's like it's just a never-ending circle.
Yeah,
So
I'm really glad you brought it up because one of the chapters in my book on overcoming fear, it's going to come out hopefully Veterans Day, by the way. The name of the book is Commit, How to Break Your Fear Barrier and Achieve Overwhelming Success in Life. I'm not sure about the subtitle yet, but one of the chapters is Envision the Victory. And what I mean by that is peak performers, fighter pilots, high level thought leaders, great businessmen and women. We prepare for the worst, but then we expect the best.
right.
I think it's okay to contingency plan to what if and what if and what if. But the issue is, and you mentioned this, Mike, is that if you don't envision the win, if all you're doing is going through the missiles and the panic attacks and the failures, then you suddenly get depressed and downtrodden and a lot more anxious. However, when you envision the victory, how are you going to feel when the customer says yes, when you get your first paycheck, when your spouse, your partner, you have your first child, or you lose that 20 pounds, or enter your first marathon and complete it? You have to envision what that victory looks like and feels like and marinate on that and meditate on it. I think in the military, I did overly focus on the what ifs of the missiles and the panic attacks. And guess what happened? They basically manifested themselves at 30,000 feet getting shot at. I mean, I would always wonder what I'm going to do if these missiles come. And and sure as shit, they happened.
Right.
But many times we've got to go through the successful mission, go through the victory. How are you going to feel when you taxi back after that 7-hour night mission and you overcame the biggest hurdle to success, your own brain and your mind, and you're coming in saying, "I kicked ass, I did it," and let that flood your soul and energy and mind and heart, and that's what we got to marinate on. So I agree with you, bro. What if contingency plan, but don't forget to what if the good. Envision the
So
victory.
what makes, and I don't know if it's most people, but what makes people manifest the worst? Why is it? What type of person manifests the worst instead of what ifing to a fantastic outcome? Is it,
Oh,
you tell me.
well, I think it's interesting. Maybe they have a past history of failures. Maybe they've been degraded and rejected and humiliated in the past when they didn't achieve
You,
success. I mean,
you're describing my childhood.
yeah. And I can relate. I didn't have the greatest childhood either. A lot of the things my parents, expected of me and the way they led wasn't really that great, but it also inspired a peak performer in me as well. So be careful wishing for the best parents. Sometimes the assholes that raised you were actually gifts, right? And I came from a very, very tough, challenging family as well. A lot of depression, a lot of stress and chaos. And my parents should have been divorced when I was 5, but they
Same
muscled it
here,
through.
man. Same here.
It's
A lot of
tough.
crying, not me. All I knew was my mother sitting in a chair crying and chain smoking. So, you know, that was it. But, what it did inspire in me and was to never be that parent.
Yes,
And,
sir.
I feel like, my kids are all old and out of the house, but I feel like I was a success at that. And really, at the end of the day, when we meet our maker, what is the legacy that we leave? I'd like to think that's it.
It's a beautiful way to give you perspective and courage. I bet if you were in a situation, Mike, I told you I was afraid of heights. And also, flying these missions. If you were claustrophobic and in a plane, you said, "Yeah, tell me about your kids again, Mike."
I got two daughters, 34 and 32, and a son who's 28.
Wow. And so do you have grandkids yet?
You know what? My middle one just told us she's expecting.
Oh, well, Mazel tov. What a
Thank
blessing.
you.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
And so that grandchild is going to reshift and totally manifest itself in a huge way in your life, I bet. Going to give you the juice you need for the next 20, 30, 40 years to kick butt and be around to love that little baby, right?
That's my goal. Absolutely.
So let me ask you, let's say the child's born, his name is Adam or Eve or whatever, right? And if you're on the edge of a diving board, and for people listening, this is important. If you're on the edge of a diving board, 30 feet high, 33 feet high, which what I had to jump off of when I went to the Air Force Academy, very uncomfortable, doable, but if you're afraid of heights, there's no way you're going to do it. Like it's
Right.
panic inducing. But if Adam and that baby, 2 years old, was swimming in the water, screaming, "Grandpa, Grandpa, help me," you're not thinking about your claustrophobia or your fear of heights. You are jumping. You will fly that 7 hour mission. You will go through hell to get on the other side of that fear. And so, one of the biggest attractors to success and building courage, and the biggest detractor is either having a vision and a purpose and something outside of yourself that you're fighting for and loving for, or not having it at all. And people who live quote unquote selfish lives, who don't have anything that they're fighting for or loving for, don't have anything that they're going to push themselves through. It's not enough. It's hard for them to create something that's going to blast through that fear barrier and have them fly that claustrophobic mission.
I agree. I agree. No, listen, without love, without people, you mentioned the word team. I think team is an unbelievably powerful word too. Just as much as what if is can be positive, can be negative. Having a strong team around you, I think, is really important. And sometimes you don't pick your team; you're given your team, and that's hard because not everyone has the same philosophy, the same work ethic, the same capacity to empathize and different things. But having a strong team is critical, and in what you were doing, having a strong team is everything. You guys relied on on each other. You were an extension of each other. If if you didn't trust somebody, that would be a big problem, I imagine.
Oh yeah. Well, part of overcoming fear and building courage is knowing that you can look to your left and right and say the three most important words in life, which are "I need help."
Yeah,
And the ability to ask for help and to know that you have partners, wingmen, on your team. That's why my book is Never Fly Solo. It's about building collaborative teams. You got to build trust in yourself, but then the next level is, hey, I look to my left and right and I have relationships with these folks. They're going to have my back. They're going to support me if I need them. They're going to lift me up and encourage me out of the dungeon of doubt and mentor me and push me and sometimes kick my butt in a good way, in a loving way, to help me get out of my head and take the action necessary to achieve peak performance in life and live your dreams. And so those relationships, those wingman trusted partner relationships, don't happen overnight. They're not easy to nurture. It takes time and patience. People come up and say, "Hey, Walter, you're my wingman." If I don't really know you, it takes a trusted partner, somebody that's going to be willing to piss you off because they love you enough to do so.
right. To
Right?
tell you something, right? Exactly. Exactly. So we went through a situation where we were thrown into a very contentious uh, kind of legal thing. And, the people who were on my team, I used to say that, you want somebody in your foxhole who no different than your wingman, who you can rely on, who you can trust. And I said, I'm involved in this with nobody who I would actively choose to be in my foxhole. And
Hmm.
that's very difficult. When you can't when you can't rely on anyone around you, it's very difficult. So Never Fly Solo. That's meant that's a book meant for people who are trying to achieve success in anything, athletics, business, life in general. Who's going to benefit from it?
It's focused on business in particular, but it's really, you can apply it to so many other areas in life. where you have a compelling goal and you're a peak performer, you're a fighter pilot or a Top Gun, and you're strapping into a new jet and you want to take out some new targets and build some victories in your life. As I mentioned before, I think the most important wingman or wingmam is first and foremost yourself. You've got to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, do I trust the guy or gal staring in front of me? Have I put in the work? Do I have the values and the integrity and the responsibility and work ethic and disciplines, all those things that are necessary to build trust in yourself? And so we always have to start with ourselves before we can expand to others. And once again, I think some people have great teams, but they're the weak link.
Right.
And
Yeah.
sometimes you're going to be the weak link. Sometimes there's going to be others on your team who are more capable and have more skills and the things that you're trying to do. And you may be that weak link. And that's okay because sometimes you got to take with honor and ask with honor and have others help you, but you do it with honor because you know you're going to be paying it forward to others.
Do
You
weak
know that
links, does the weak link always recognize that they're the weak link?
they're not always, that's absolutely not, it's innocent, ignorance is one thing and innocently ignorance is another. Like they may not, they may not realize that. And that's why that feedback that they're given, they need to be receptive to the things that they may not want to hear, but need to hear. So a great wingman is like, hey man, what do you got from me? Bruise my ego. We talked about feedback before,
Right,
Mike,
right.
a great wingman, somebody who is growth focused is like, hey, give me some feedback. How do I improve? Do it with tact. Piss me off if you need to, especially if I'm doing something that's detrimental to my health or to people that I love.
So how does a wingman, so, I think of different things I'm involved in. I'm the board chair of a charity. And, you have your weak links and you have your performers and, you don't necessarily know these people well enough to say, what are you doing or what are you not doing? So if if you don't have that relationship, what do you do? Do you
So you,
still lead with
Elizabeth,
honesty?
so Elizabeth Dole, when she ran the Red Cross, she said, I didn't wait for the rivers to flood before I built relationships. When you call out Mayday, Mayday, or somebody comes and asks you to help them and be inconvenienced on a weekend or coach them or do something that's going to take time out of your day and distract you from doing things that you want to know that that person established some relationship or that you got to know each other beforehand, that you invested in getting to know the human behind the coworker or the board member or the teammate on your baseball team. So this is why in fighter squadrons, once a month, we would all get together and have something called First Friday. We'd break bread, we'd drink some beer, we'd barbecue, we'd be out of the squadron many times, sometimes outside of uniform or out of uniform, but we just got to know each other. We'd share a little bit about our families and our dreams and challenges and just got to know each other as human beings first rather than fighter pilots. And
So relationship building is what it's all about. If if you're building a team,
if you're building a team, I don't think it's everything though, Mike. I don't think it's all about the relationship. It's all about the mission. The mission, taking out the target, defending the airfield, everybody getting home safely. I flew with guys and gals that I didn't necessarily like, that had different accents, different sexualities, this and that. Didn't mean that I wouldn't trust them or fly with them. It didn't matter. If you were doing the job, that was the most important thing. But sometimes we had to you know, put the priority of the mission above the relationship.
right?
And if it's all about the relationship, I may not be willing to piss you off or say something that you may need to hear, but may need to hear, but not want to hear. I may not have that tough, crucial conversation with you because, hey, I don't want to ruin this relationship. But if that's going to impact the accomplishment of the mission, then I'm not doing the mission a service. So your board, I'm assuming that it may be the nonprofit for the Heroes to Heroes Foundation.
Yep.
Well, you got to always know it's those folks that are in the dungeon of doubt, those veterans who need you to help. And that's going to be enough to sacrifice. That's going to be enough to say, hey, man, I need to put in some extra hours. That may be enough to say, we need to pivot here and invest more time because other people are needing us. And this goes back to the fear and how we're able to be peak performers. It's one thing knowing, Mike, that you have others that can help you through the missiles of life and that they can coach you and mentor you and lift you and encourage you. But it's another thing for you to realize that you often need to be that harbinger of hope, that comrade of courage, that it's also your responsibility that to lead them. And as a parent, you understand how important that is because you're willing to sacrifice so much. But a great leader, truly service focused, is like, oh, others are depending on me. I've got to do this because if I don't do this, all these other people are going to be impacted.
It's great. You know what? You've inspired me. I mean, that's 100% correct. We need to, yeah, we need to lead in the direction where that satisfies and completes a mission, no question. And you deal with those around you, as best you can. I mean, if you're in your role as a fighter pilot, you had like-minded people who all wanted to, I assume, for the most part, achieve the mission. Otherwise, they wouldn't be where they were. I think it's a little bit different in in a not-for-profit realm where
Yeah.
people are donating their time. They may be busy, maybe they didn't realize what they were getting into. So, but it's all part of the same thing. And I appreciate that. That's fantastic advice. And I hope I might use this clip and share it with my board because I think it's important
Yes, sir.
for people to understand that.
And
So
if they're not passionate about the mission, then it's okay. Maybe they need to do something else that they're passionate about. But that's why, selecting the board and selecting these volunteers who are going through a lot and sacrificing their time, it's important. And that's why it's even more important also to garner that passion, to see the impact that you're making with those folks that you're helping out of the dungeon of doubt.
yeah,
And when you hear that testimony, when you see the difference you're making in their lives, and that's what's so beautiful about what you do as a nonprofit. I have my own nonprofit called the Wingman Foundation. I give funds and awareness to veterans and their families in need who've gone through some trauma. It's a very small nonprofit, but
how can people find it?
it's my website got taken down. It's got hacked. It used to be the Wingman Foundation dot com. Uh, but they can email me at info@yourwingman.com. I get private donations and I actually take my own money and send it to veterans in need.
It's
Um,
beautiful. That's
yeah,
beautiful. And
but
tell me a little bit, just quickly, because we're running out of time, but a little bit about your coaching. If somebody wanted to benefit from what you have to offer, how would somebody get involved with that?
so okay, you've heard the expression check six. If you haven't, let me explain it a little bit. We fighter pilots who provide mutual support. The reason why we're successful is we have people who are checking our blind spot behind us. 12 o'clock out front of the aircraft, it's easy to see, but many times the threat's coming from behind you. You don't know if you're leaking fuel or on fire or something's going on, but if you have a teammate looking over their shoulder, looking at your 6 o'clock, your blind spot, and then calling out the threat to you and maybe even the opportunity or the target that you may not see, this is how you provide mutual support. So coaching for me is about calling out, exposing those blind spots that people may have, the insecurities and mentally, emotionally, the habits, et cetera, maybe the skill sets that they may not have, that they need advice on how to overcome. And some people, like you said, they don't even know their weaknesses. They don't know the missiles are coming. They don't know the blind spots, or they don't even want to acknowledge them. But guys like us, right?
How do those people get to you? if they're
All right. So if you email me at waldo@yourwingman.com, waldo@yourwingman.com, or find me on social media at Waldo Waldman, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc., send me a note, let them know that they found me on this podcast. And just let me know. And a lot of times it's like these type of conversations, it's those loving conversations, it's the occasional hugs and the occasional rubber boots in the butt, baby. Because I think people need just a little positive love, a little stern, loving kick in the rear end to get them out of their comfort zone, to get them thinking.
tough love, I guess,
Tough love.
is what they call it. But
And
I'm going to look for some weak links and send them your way.
yes, sir.
Listen, Waldo, I know you're incredibly busy, and I truly, truly appreciate you coming on for a second time. And, I would love to speak with you sometime again in the future. You're,
Absolutely.
you're a good man.
You are
I'm,
too, Michael.
I'm
Uh,
proud to say I'm going to consider you my wingman, and you can consider me yours, but only if you want to.
Consider it done.
All right.
You got to plant the seed and continue to water it. And we've done that over the last few conversations. And I'm proud
Yes,
to
we
know
have.
you. And thank you for all the wings that you're giving others to fly as well, Mike.
Well, thank you. You keep up the great work that you do.
You got it, my friend.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. That's a wrap for this episode of Do You Ever Wonder? Thanks for listening. If you